Ever launch a landing page and, you're like, this is it. This is going to be huge. And then nothing. It's like trying to figure out what makes website visitors tick. Sometimes it feels impossible.
Yeah, it's tough to rely on just intuition, right? What we think will work and what people actually do on a website, two totally different things. That's where heat maps come in. Hard data, showing you exactly how people interact with your site. Powerful stuff.
Data, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I dug into this guide we have on heat maps and reader engagement, and honestly, some of it blew my mind.
Oh, yeah. It's a deep topic, for sure.
Yep.
This deep dive is for anyone who's ever looked at their website stats and thought, but what does it all mean? We're going to crack the code on user behavior. Clicks, scrolls, even eye movements, we're covering it all.
And it's not just simple click tracking anymore, right? I mean, I was reading about all these different types of heat maps.
You've got your click tracking, which is kind of the classic, shows you what's getting clicked on the most. But then layer on scroll depth heat maps. You see how far down the page people are actually going. And then get this, there's eye tracking heat maps.
Eye tracking? How do they even track your eyes through the screen? Seems kind of like, I don't know, magic or something.
Some of the tech is seriously impressive. You've got some tools that use your webcam, others that use algorithms to predict where your eyes are going based on mouse movements and scrolling. Wild stuff.
See, that's where I get lost. The guide mentions all these tools, Hotjar, Crazy Egg, there's Mouseflow. How's anyone supposed to choose?
That's a great question. And honestly, it depends. Each tool has its strengths,
Yeah.
like Hotjar's got it all, session recordings, surveys on top of the heat maps, Crazy Eggs more focused on heat maps and A/B testing. Mouseflow is really good for form, so it all boils down to what you're trying to achieve, really.
Right, like pick the right tool for the job. Makes sense. But even then, you've got all this data, these heat maps. What do you do with it? I mean, it's kind of like looking at a weather map, right? Lots of colors, but what's it all mean? All right, so we've got these heat maps, right? All these colors. But how do we go from, ooh, that's red, to actually making our website better?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Anyone can look at a heat map, but figuring out what it means, that's the real skill.
Give me an example. Say I'm looking at a heat map for, I don't know, a blog post I wrote. What's a mistake people make trying to analyze that?
One of the biggest ones. Assuming that hot automatically equals good. Like, you see a lot of activity around an image, you might think, people love this image, but then you look at a scroll depth heat map, and bam, most people aren't even scrolling down that far to see it.
Whoa, so it's like they're clicking there, but not because they're engaged, more like frustrated or something.
Exactly. Context is everything. A hot spot on its own doesn't tell you the whole story. That's why using different types of heat maps together is so key. Like click tracking plus scroll depth, you get a much clearer picture.
Right, like putting together the pieces of a puzzle. This reminds me, the guide mentioned areas of interest or something like that.
Yeah, areas of interest or AOIs. It's like instead of looking at the whole page, you zoom in on a specific section. Your call to action button, a particular image, whatever you want to analyze in detail.
So with my blog post, I could set an AOI around, say, the comments section. See if people are even getting down there, actually engaging.
Exactly. And you can combine that with the click tracking, eye tracking, really get granular, see if they're clicking on the comment box, how long they're spending reading other comments, all of that.
You know what this reminds me of?
Yeah.
That case study in the guide about the download now button. Small change. Huge difference.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic example. They thought their button was in the perfect spot, bottom of the page, all this persuasive content leading up to it. Click tracking even showed decent activity. But then they looked at the scroll depth heat map.
And nobody was even seeing the button.
Exactly. Moved it higher up the page, downloads skyrocketed. Proof that what we think is happening and what's actually happening, two totally different things sometimes.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get this whole heat map thing. But honestly, still a little intimidated. Like, what if I misinterpret the data or make a decision based on, like, not enough data points or something? That's the thing, right? It feels easy to mess this up.
Oh, for sure. There are definitely some common traps people fall into. The guide actually calls them out, which is super helpful, like a heat map detective crash course or something.
All right, lay it on me. What should it be watching out for?
Well, we talked about it earlier, but it's easy to get caught up in those colors, Like, just because an area is bright red doesn't automatically mean it's a good thing.
Right, like my super clickable but way too low blog post image.
Exactly. Another one is sample size. It's tempting to get excited about data from 10 visitors, but you got to make sure you've got enough data for it to actually mean something.
So what's a good sample size then?
It's not exact science, but the guide gives some decent guidelines. Low traffic site, you want a couple hundred user sessions at least. Medium traffic, 1,000 plus. And high traffic, think several thousand for really solid insights.
Makes sense. You wouldn't like do a research study with 10 people and call it a day, right?
Exactly. Oh, and another thing, page load times can really mess with your data if you're not careful.
Really? How so?
Imagine a page is taking forever to load, and someone's clicking a button over and over thinking it's not working. You'll see a heat map hotspot, but not because the button's amazing, because the site's slow.
Ah, so frustrating.
The worst. Most tools let you set a delay for tracking, so you're only measuring once the page is fully loaded, at least. And, making your website load faster is always a good idea anyway.
For a million reasons, yeah. Speaking of which, the guide totally surprised me with all the different ways heat maps are being used these days. I had no idea it went beyond websites.
Oh, yeah, it's wild. Retail stores use them to track customer movement, figure out product placement, optimize the layout. There's even a case study in there about Melbourne using heat maps to, improve city planning from pedestrian sensors, no less.
That's incredible. Data really is powerful stuff.
Totally. And we're just getting started, honestly. The guide even talks about the future of heat maps, things like AI-powered predictive heat maps. Imagine knowing what your users are going to do before they do it.
Whoa, that's next level.
It really is. But I think the big takeaway here is heat maps aren't just for the techies anymore. Whether you're a blogger, a business owner, whatever, there's a heat map out there that can help you understand your audience better.
So true. Well, before we wrap up this deep dive, one last thing to ponder. Imagine you could see a heat map of your own website, presentation, even your store right now. What's the first thing you'd be curious to analyze? What hidden patterns, what little mysteries do you think you might uncover? Keep that question in mind, and we will see you next time for another deep dive.